She was a genius CEO who never played by the rules of emotion. When her company faced destruction, she immediately made an unthinkable move, marrying a complete stranger for maintenance. But what she didn't know was that he was also executing a secret mission, and she wasn't the only one setting traps. In the glass towers of downtown Seattle, where billion-dollar deals were struck with handshakes and destroyed with whispers, Camille Hartley had built her empire on one simple principle: trust data, never people. At 36, she commanded Helix Defense with the precision of a chess grandmaster, her every move calculated 3 steps ahead. The defense contractor she had inherited from her late father had grown under her leadership into a technological powerhouse, developing cutting-edge security systems for governments worldwide. The Hartley legacy stretched back 3 generations, beginning with her grandfather Marcus, who had started the company in his garage after World War II. Her father, William, had transformed it from a small electronics firm into a major defense contractor. But it was Camille who had revolutionized everything, integrating artificial intelligence and quantum computing into weapons systems that seemed like science fiction just a decade before. But on this gray October morning, as rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, Camille faced a threat that no algorithm could have predicted. Richard Cale sat across from her mahogany desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile as sharp as broken glass. At 51, he had the kind of confidence that came from destroying smaller companies before breakfast, the kind of presence that made boardrooms fall silent when he entered. "Your board meeting is tomorrow," Richard said, adjusting his platinum cufflinks with deliberate slowness. "I trust you've prepared your shareholders for the transition." Camille's fingers never stopped moving across her tablet, analyzing the latest market data with the focused intensity that had made her legendary in corporate circles. Her office was a testament to her analytical mind, multiple monitors displaying real-time intelligence feeds, walls lined with awards and patents, a chess set where she played against herself during late-night strategy sessions. "There won't be a transition, Richard. Helix isn't for sale." "Everything is for sale, my dear. It's simply a matter of price." He leaned forward, his gray eyes cold as winter steel, the kind of gaze that had intimidated CEOs twice his size. "Your father understood that. Before his unfortunate accident." The words hung in the air like poison. Camille's hand stilled for the first time in hours. Her father's death in that mountain-climbing expedition 3 years ago had never felt accidental to her, but proving it was another matter entirely. William Hartley had been an experienced climber, meticulous in his preparation, careful to the point of obsession. The official investigation had found no evidence of foul play, but something in her gut had always whispered that the timing was too convenient. "My father also understood loyalty," she replied, her voice steady as a surgeon's blade. "Something you seem to have forgotten when you left his company to start your own." Richard's laugh was bitter, carrying decades of resentment and carefully nursed grievances. "Loyalty? He cast me aside the moment you graduated business school. 20 years of partnership meant nothing when his precious daughter needed a corner office. You were embezzling from the research and development budget. I was planning for the future. Your father was too sentimental to see that Helix needed to evolve or die." Richard stood, smoothing his $1,000 suit with practiced elegance. "Now it's dying anyway. Your stock prices have dropped 18% this quarter. Your lead engineer defected to my company last month with half his team. Your largest government contract expires in 6 weeks, and my contacts at the Pentagon tell me renewal is unlikely." Each word was a calculated strike, delivered with the precision of someone who had spent months identifying weaknesses and pressure points. Camille felt them land, but she had survived board coups and hostile takeovers before. She had survived her father's death and her mother's subsequent breakdown and eventual death from cancer 2 years later. She would survive Richard Cale. "You're forgetting something," she said, finally looking up from her tablet with the kind of direct gaze that had made venture capitalists write 8-figure checks without reading the fine print. "What's that?" "I don't lose. Everyone loses eventually, Camille. The question is whether you'll walk away with something or watch everything burn. Your employees, your shareholders, your father's legacy, all of it will be ash if you force my hand." "And what exactly is your hand, Richard? What makes you so confident that you can take something my family has built over 70 years? Richard's smile widened, and for the first time, Camille saw something genuinely dangerous beneath his corporate veneer. "Because I know things about Helix Defense that would make your government contracts disappear overnight. because I have connections that reach into places you've never imagined. And because I've been planning this for far longer than you realize." After Richard left, trailing the scent of expensive cologne and veiled threats, Camille stood alone in her office. The city sprawled below her, millions of lights beginning to flicker on as dusk approached. Somewhere in those lights were the 15,000 employees depending on her, the families whose livelihoods hung in the balance of whatever decisions she made next. She had built her life around avoiding the kind of emotional decisions that had destroyed other leaders. While her competitors made choices based on ego or sentiment, Camille relied on data, probability matrices, and cold mathematical analysis. It had made her wealthy beyond imagination and powerful beyond her years. But it had also made her profoundly alone. The loneliness had never bothered her before. She had told herself that emotional attachments were vulnerabilities, that trusting people was a luxury she couldn't afford in a world where corporate espionage was routine and friendly handshakes often preceded hostile takeovers. But standing in her empty office, facing the possibility of losing everything her family had built, she wondered if her isolation might finally be her undoing. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk and withdrew a sealed envelope marked with her mother's careful handwriting. Elizabeth Hartley had left specific instructions that this letter was only to be opened if Helix faced existential threat. 6 months after her mother's death from cancer, Camille had never felt that threshold had been crossed. Until now. The paper was cream-colored, expensive, the same stationery her mother had used for formal occasions and important correspondence. But the words were pure Elizabeth Hartley, brilliant, unconventional, and slightly dangerous. "My dearest Camille," the letter began in her mother's precise script. "If you're reading this, then someone has pushed you into a corner where traditional strategy has failed. Your father always said that in chess, when all conventional moves lead to defeat, you must sacrifice a piece to create chaos. But I always told him he was thinking too small. When predictable attacks can be anticipated, choose the move that even a computer cannot calculate. The human heart, my darling, is the only true wild card left in our digital age. Use it wisely, use it boldly, and remember that sometimes the most illogical decision is the most strategically sound." Camille read the letter 3 times before she understood what her mother was suggesting. It was insane. It was illogical. It violated every principle of strategic thinking she had ever learned. It was exactly the kind of move that might save everything. The next morning, she walked through Helix's sprawling complex with new eyes. The headquarters occupied 6 buildings connected by sky bridges, a small city dedicated to the business of national defense. Past the laboratories where her engineers designed tomorrow's weapons systems, working with quantum processors and artificial intelligence networks that pushed the boundaries of what was technologically possible. Past the conference rooms where million-dollar deals were negotiated with governments that officially didn't exist. Past the executive floors where her competitors' spies undoubtedly lurked, gathering intelligence for their own strategic purposes. She descended to the basement levels, where the maintenance staff worked in anonymity. These were the invisible people who kept the building running, who had access to every room and every secret, yet whom the executives never truly saw. They moved through the corporate ecosystem like ghosts, essential but unnoticed, trusted with everything and credited with nothing. Nathan Dorn was replacing a fluorescent bulb in the sub-basement when Camille found him. At 42, he moved with the economy of someone who had learned not to waste motion, every gesture precise and purposeful. His dark hair was beginning to show gray at the temples, and his hands, she noticed his hands immediately, were scarred in ways that didn't come from maintenance work. There were calluses that suggested weapons training, and a thin white line across his knuckles that looked suspiciously like a knife wound. "Mr. Dorn," she said, and he turned with a calmness that surprised her. Most employees grew nervous in her presence, stumbling over words or standing at awkward attention. Nathan simply met her gaze with steady brown eyes that seemed to assess her with the same analytical intensity she usually reserved for hostile board members. "Ma'am." His voice was quiet, controlled, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. He had been working at Helix for 5 years, according to his personnel file, but looking at him now, Camille realized she knew almost nothing about the man she was about to propose to. "I have a proposition for you. One that will require complete discretion and absolute commitment." Nathan set down his tools and gave her his full attention. There was something in the way he listened, not like an employee receiving orders, but like an equal assessing a potential ally. Most people in his position would have been intimidated by her sudden appearance, by the obvious importance of whatever she was about to discuss. Nathan seemed merely curious. "I'm listening. I need a husband. For 6 months. The arrangement would be purely contractual, of course. You would live in my penthouse, attend certain social functions, and convince the world that Camille Hartley has done something completely unpredictable. In return, you would receive $500,000 and a guarantee that whatever secrets you're hiding will remain hidden." Nathan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, not surprise exactly, but a kind of recognition, as if he had been expecting something unusual, but perhaps not quite this unusual. "What makes you think I have secrets?" "Everyone has secrets, Mr. Dorn. The question is whether yours align with my needs." She paused, studying his face with the same intensity she brought to analyzing market trends. "You've worked here for 5 years, but your employment history before that has gaps that don't make sense. You have skills that go far beyond what your position requires. And yesterday, when that reporter was asking intrusive questions near the loading dock, you positioned yourself so that your body blocked the camera's view of the shipping manifests. Most people would have stepped aside." Nathan nodded slowly, and she could almost see him running calculations of his own. "When do we start?" The wedding took place 3 days later in a small chapel overlooking Elliott Bay. Camille wore a simple ivory dress that cost more than most people's cars, its elegant lines designed by a Milan couturier who usually dressed European royalty. Nathan wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, too perfectly, she realized, for someone who allegedly shopped off the rack. The tailoring was expensive, probably bespoke, which raised new questions about his background that she filed away for later analysis. The ceremony was brief, efficient, and utterly devoid of emotion. They exchanged vows written by lawyers and rings purchased by assistants. The chapel held only the minimum number of witnesses required by law, her personal attorney, his building supervisor, and a photographer who captured images that would soon appear in newspapers around the world. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was a mere brushing of lips, a business transaction sealed with the most minimal of physical contact. But even that brief touch sent an unexpected jolt through Camille, a reminder that beneath the strategic calculations and corporate maneuvering, they were still two people whose lives had just become inextricably linked. The media response was immediate and explosive. Defense heiress marries maintenance worker in surprise ceremony. Camille Hartley's shocking wedding to unknown employee. Love or strategy? CEO's unexpected marriage raises questions. The story dominated business news for 48 hours, drowning out everything else in a flood of speculation and analysis. Financial markets reacted with confusion and volatility. Helix Defense stock prices swung wildly as investors tried to understand what the marriage meant for the company's future. Some analysts declared it a brilliant publicity stunt, others worried about Camille's mental stability, and a few suggested it might be connected to some larger corporate strategy they hadn't yet identified. Richard Cale's reaction was exactly what Camille had hoped for. Within hours of the announcement, his carefully orchestrated assault on Helix Defense faltered. Board members who had been pressured to vote against her began asking questions about her new husband's background. Journalists who had been fed negative stories about her leadership suddenly had a fairy tale romance to cover instead. The financial pressure that had been building for weeks suddenly eased as the market's attention shifted to the human interest angle. But as Camille soon discovered, marrying Nathan Dorn had introduced variables she hadn't accounted for. Living with him was like sharing space with a ghost. He moved through her penthouse with silent efficiency, never touching her possessions, never leaving traces of his presence except for the faint scent of soap and steel that lingered in rooms after he passed through them. The apartment was 3,500 square feet of modern elegance, with panoramic views of the Sound and furnishings that cost more than most people earned in a year. But Nathan occupied it like a temporary visitor, careful not to disturb anything that might indicate he belonged there. He cooked breakfast before she woke and had dinner ready when she returned from work, but they ate in virtual silence, each absorbed in their respective analysis of the day's intelligence. Because that's what it was, Camille realized. Nathan wasn't simply observing their environment, he was conducting surveillance. The way his eyes tracked movement through the windows, the subtle way he tested locks and security cameras, the fact that he somehow knew which of her household staff could be trusted and which couldn't. These weren't skills learned in maintenance training. "You were military," she said one evening. watching him efficiently clean their dinner dishes with the kind of methodical precision that suggested institutional training. Everyone assumes that. It's not an assumption. Yesterday, when the elevator made that grinding noise, you instinctively moved to put yourself between me and the sound. That's protective positioning, trained response. She set down her wine glass, focusing on him with the analytical intensity that had made her fortune. The way you hold a knife when you're cooking suggests combat training. The scars on your hands aren't from maintenance accidents, and you sleep exactly 4 hours each night, which is consistent with military conditioning for high-stress operations. Nathan dried a wine glass with careful precision, his movements economical and practiced. Maybe I'm just polite. Polite doesn't explain why you wake up at the slightest sound, or why there are calluses on your hands from weapons training, or why you somehow know the building's security protocols better than people who've worked here for decades. He set the glass down and turned to face her, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw something genuine in his expression, not the careful neutrality he usually maintained, but a flash of the man beneath the performance. "Are you worried about your safety, Mrs. Dorn?" The name still felt strange, like a costume that didn't quite fit. "I'm worried about variables I can't calculate." "Then calculate this," Nathan said, stepping closer. "Every morning, I check the security feeds for unusual activity. Every evening, I verify that no one has accessed your private files. Every night, I make sure that the only people who know your location are people who need to know. Whatever secrets I have, they're working in your favor." The first assassination attempt came 2 weeks later. Camille was working late in her office, as she did most nights, surrounded by financial reports and intelligence briefings that painted an increasingly troubling picture of Richard's activities. The building was nearly empty, just security guards and a few dedicated engineers pulling all-nighters in the lower levels. Outside her windows, Seattle glittered in the darkness, oblivious to the corporate warfare being waged in its gleaming towers. The lights went out suddenly, completely, as if someone had thrown a master switch. Emergency power kicked in immediately, bathing everything in hellish red, but those crucial seconds of darkness were all the intruder needed. She heard the whisper of a suppressed weapon and threw herself behind her desk just as the chair she'd been sitting in exploded in a shower of stuffing and splinters. The office door burst open and Nathan appeared, moving with liquid grace through the shadows. But this wasn't the quiet maintenance worker she had married. He wasn't holding a janitor's tools, the weapon in his hands was military grade, and he used it with the precision of someone who had killed before. 3 quick shots, and the sniper on the neighboring rooftop went silent forever. "Are you hurt?" Nathan asked, helping her to her feet with gentle but professional hands that checked for injuries even as they steadied her. Camille's hands were shaking from adrenaline, she told herself, not fear. She had survived board meetings that would have broken lesser executives, but someone had just tried to murder her in her own office. "How did you know?" Thermal imaging showed someone rappelling down the building across the street. "I've been monitoring for threats since day 1. "Monitoring how? With what equipment?" Nathan holstered his weapon beneath his jacket, the motion so smooth it seemed rehearsed. "Equipment that doesn't officially exist." "Nathan." She grabbed his arm, feeling solid muscle beneath the fabric of his shirt. "Who are you really?" "Someone who needs you alive." The attack changed everything. Suddenly, their marriage of convenience became a genuine partnership of survival. Richard's gloves were off, and Camille realized that her father's death might have been just the beginning of a much larger game. The attempt on her life had been professional, well-planned, executed by someone with serious resources and no moral constraints. "He's escalating," she said the next morning, studying security footage of the attack in her private conference room. The video showed the sniper's approach with chilling clarity, a figure in black tactical gear moving with military precision. "Which means we're succeeding. He's feeling threatened." Nathan was examining the sniper's equipment, cataloging each piece with professional thoroughness. The weapons were top tier, the kind of gear that cost more than most people's houses and wasn't available through normal channels. This isn't random violence. The weapons, the timing, the execution, this was planned by someone with serious resources. Richard has resources. Not these resources. This gear is military surplus from black budget operations. Whoever equipped this team has connections to very dark places. Nathan looked up from the rifle scope he'd been examining. "This isn't corporate espionage, Camille. This is something much more dangerous." Camille felt a chill that had nothing to do with Seattle's autumn weather. What are you saying? I'm saying that your husband has made enemies who don't appear on any corporate organizational chart. The second attack came during the annual Defense Contractors Gala, the kind of glittering event where billion-dollar deals were struck over champagne and caviar. Camille was delivering a keynote speech about the future of cybersecurity to an audience of 400 of the industry's most powerful people: generals, cabinet members, CEOs who controlled weapons systems that could level cities. She was midway through her presentation when someone hacked into the building's emergency systems. Suddenly, every exit was sealed, every elevator stopped, and poison gas began filtering through the ventilation system. The acrid smell filled the ballroom within seconds, causing immediate panic among people who weren't accustomed to physical danger. Panic spread through the ballroom like wildfire. 400 of the defense industry's most powerful people trampled each other in a desperate rush toward exits that wouldn't open. Generals who had commanded armies and politicians who had started wars found themselves clawing at doors like trapped animals. But Nathan was already moving, pulling Camille toward a service corridor she hadn't even noticed. "Emergency protocols," he shouted over the chaos, his voice cutting through the screams and alarms. "The kitchen staff exit opens on a manual override." They ran through service hallways as alarms screamed around them, Nathan leading with the confidence of someone who had memorized every blueprint, every emergency system, every possible escape route. Behind them, Camille could hear the sound of breaking glass as windows were shattered in desperate attempts to escape, the crash of overturned tables, and the terrified voices of people who had never expected to fight for their lives. "How do you know about the manual override?" Camille gasped as they reached the kitchen, her lungs burning from the fumes. "Because I installed it." Nathan pulled a panel off the wall, revealing electronics that definitely hadn't been there during the building's original construction. His fingers flew over a keypad with practiced efficiency, and suddenly the steel door swung open, revealing blessed fresh air and freedom. "Go," he said, pushing her toward the exit. "What about the others?" "The gas is fake. Designed to cause panic, not casualties. Everyone will be fine once they stop trying to kill each other." As they stood in the alley behind the convention center, watching emergency vehicles arrive with sirens blazing, Camille studied her husband's profile in the flashing lights. He was scanning the surrounding buildings with the systematic thoroughness of someone trained in threat assessment, his body positioned to shield her from potential sniper positions. "You've been planning for this." "I've been planning for everything." "Nathan." She turned to face him directly, ignoring the chaos around them. "Who are you really?" He was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, she could almost see him making calculations of his own. Trust versus operational security. Mission parameters versus personal feelings that might have been growing despite his professional discipline. "Someone who needs Richard Cale stopped as much as you do." The investigation that followed revealed nothing official. Security cameras had malfunctioned at crucial moments, their hard drives mysteriously corrupted. The gas turned out to be theatrical fog mixed with harmless but frightening-smelling chemicals designed to cause panic without permanent damage. No fingerprints, no DNA, no trace of the perpetrators except for the sophisticated coordination required to pull off such an operation. But Camille was beginning to understand that the official investigation was irrelevant. The real war was being fought in shadows by people who didn't exist in any database she could access. Richard wasn't just a corporate rival. He was connected to something far more dangerous, a network of operators who treated human lives as acceptable casualties in their larger game. She began her own investigation. Using resources that Richard had probably forgotten she possessed, Camille dove into financial records, personnel files, and archived news reports going back decades. She traced shell companies through offshore banks, analyzed patterns in government contracts, and cross-referenced employee movements between defense contractors. Her analytical mind, trained on corporate strategy, proved equally effective at intelligence work. What she found chilled her to the bone. Richard wasn't just a rival CEO with a grudge. He was connected to a network of arms dealers, mercenaries, and intelligence operatives who trafficked in secrets that could topple governments. The company he had built after leaving Helix Defense wasn't just a competitor, it was a front for weapons sales to organizations that officially didn't exist, terrorists groups, and rogue states that paid premium prices for cutting-edge military technology. The financial trails led through banks in countries without extradition treaties, shell companies registered in jurisdictions where privacy laws made investigation impossible, and payment systems designed to launder money from sources that would horrify the general public. Richard had built an empire on blood money, selling death to the highest bidder while maintaining the facade of a legitimate businessman, and Nathan's name appeared in those files. Not as Nathan Dorn, maintenance worker. As Agent Phoenix, a deep-cover operative whose specialty was infiltrating criminal organizations and dismantling them from within. His last official mission had ended 18 months ago when his entire team was killed in an operation that had been compromised from within. The surviving mission reports painted a picture of a brilliant operative who had gone off the grid after discovering that his handler, the person responsible for his team's deaths, was still active and still dangerous. Agent Phoenix had been hunting that handler ever since, working outside official channels, following a trail of corruption that led from foreign battlefields to American boardrooms. That handler's name was Richard Cale. Camille sat in her study, surrounded by printouts and classified documents that shouldn't have existed, trying to process the magnitude of what she had uncovered. Her marriage was fake, but the conspiracy surrounding it was terrifyingly real. Her husband was a spy, but he was also a man seeking justice for murdered friends. Her enemy was worse than she had imagined, but she finally understood why Nathan had agreed to help her. "You knew," she said when Nathan returned from his evening security sweep. He saw the documents spread across her desk and nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Some of it. Richard killed your team. Richard gave the order. He wasn't the one pulling triggers." Nathan poured himself a glass of whiskey from her bar, his first drink since their marriage began. "But he's the one who sold them out, who turned a routine intelligence operation into a massacre. And you've been hunting him ever since." Nathan took a sip of whiskey, savoring it like a man who rarely allowed himself such luxuries. "I've been waiting for the right opportunity. Cale is protected by layers of legitimate business and government connections. You can't just walk up and shoot him. So you used me. I used the situation, just like you used me." Camille felt something twist in her chest, anger, betrayal, or perhaps disappointment that what had begun to feel real was just another performance. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? The CEO who doesn't trust anyone, and the spy who lies for a living." Camille. Nathan set down his glass and turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. Vulnerability, perhaps, or the kind of honesty that came at great personal cost. "Everything I told you about protecting you, about keeping you safe, that was real. Was it? Or was I just useful cover for your revenge mission?" "Both." His honesty was brutal and somehow reassuring. But somewhere between the fake wedding and the real bullets, things changed. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to trust him. But trust was a luxury she had never been able to afford, and learning that her husband was a federal agent seeking revenge against the same man who threatened her company felt like too much coincidence to accept at face value. "Richard is planning something big," she said, focusing on the intelligence spread before them. "These financial transfers, the timing of the attacks he's building toward a major operation." Nathan studied the documents over her shoulder, and she was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of his body, the subtle scent of his aftershave, mixed with something that might have been cordite from his evening weapons maintenance. "The Helix Defense prototype presentation is next week. Your new AI-assisted defense grid. How do you know about that? That's classified above your clearance level." Because Agent Phoenix's clearance level is significantly higher than Nathan Dorn's. The prototype presentation was Helix Defense's most important event of the year. Government officials, military brass, and allied defense contractors would gather to see the future of national security, an AI system that could coordinate defensive responses across multiple platforms, react to threats faster than human operators, and adapt to new attack patterns in real time. It represented 5 years of development and hundreds of millions of dollars in research. It was also the perfect opportunity for Richard to strike a killing blow against everything Camille had built. He's going to sabotage the demonstration, she realized. Make it look like our systems are flawed or compromised. Worse than that. Nathan was reading through Richard's financial records with the focused intensity of a codebreaker. These payments to offshore accounts, the timing, he's not just planning to embarrass you. He's planning to frame you for treason. The words hit like physical blows. Treason meant prison, disgrace, the complete destruction of everything her family had built over 3 generations. It meant that Richard would win absolutely, taking control of Helix Defense and using it to expand his criminal empire with the full backing of the U.S. government. We have to stop him. We will. Nathan's voice carried the cold certainty of someone who had ended threats before. But we're going to do it together. No more secrets, no more separate agendas. Full partnership. Camille looked at the man she had married as a strategic gambit and realized that somewhere in the midst of fake romance and real danger, she had begun to trust him. Not because data supported that decision, but because her heart had made calculations that her mind couldn't process. Full partnership, she agreed. The week leading up to the prototype presentation was a masterclass in coordinated warfare. Camille used her corporate resources to trace Richard's financial networks, while Nathan employed his intelligence contacts to map the operational structure of the conspiracy against them. They worked 18-hour days, sustained by coffee, determination, and a growing awareness that they functioned as a team with an efficiency that transcended their individual capabilities. Camille's analytical brilliance, combined with Nathan's operational experience, created a synergy that neither had expected. She could identify patterns in financial data that revealed the structure of criminal networks, while he understood how those networks operated in practice. Together, they began to see the full scope of Richard's operation, not just a corporate takeover, but a systematic infiltration of the defense industry that had been years in the making. "He's been planning this since before your father died," Nathan announced on the morning of the event, spreading surveillance photos across their dining table. These meetings with foreign operatives, the recruitment of assets within government agencies, this isn't opportunistic. This is a long-term strategy to compromise American defense capabilities. And the prototype presentation is his endgame. He's going to use the demonstration itself. Our intelligence suggests he's planted evidence that will make it appear you've been selling defense secrets to foreign governments. When the AI system demonstrates its capabilities, he'll trigger a data breach that points directly to you. How do we counter it? We give him exactly what he wants, and then we turn it against him. The Seattle Convention Center had been transformed into a high-tech showcase, its cavernous main hall filled with displays representing the cutting edge of military technology. Defense contractors competed for attention with sleek presentations of weapons systems that seemed like props from science fiction movies. Military officials and government contractors filled the auditorium, while security personnel maintained a perimeter that Nathan had helped design. On stage, the Helix Defense prototype hummed quietly, its sleek curves hiding revolutionary technology that could reshape modern warfare. The AI system was contained in a housing no larger than a refrigerator, but its computational power exceeded anything previously developed for military applications. Camille stood at the podium, radiant in a navy suit that projected authority and confidence. To the audience, she appeared calm, professional, completely in control. Only Nathan, watching from the wings, could see the slight tension in her shoulders that indicated she was ready for battle. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying easily through the packed auditorium, "today you will witness the future of national defense. Our AI-assisted grid represents 5 years of development and the combined expertise of our finest engineers. But more than that, it represents our commitment to protecting the freedoms we hold dear." In the audience, Richard Cale sat in the third row, his silver hair perfect under the stage lights, his smile sharp with anticipation. He had no idea that his every move was being monitored by security cameras that Nathan had reprogrammed, or that the smartphone in his pocket had been compromised by software that Camille had developed specifically for this moment. The demonstration began flawlessly. Helix Defense's AI system tracked simulated threats with stunning accuracy, coordinating defensive responses that would have required dozens of human operators just years before. The audience watched in fascination as the technology that would define the next generation of warfare unfolded before their eyes. Then Richard made his move. The cyber attack was sophisticated, multifaceted, designed to overwhelm Helix's systems while simultaneously implanting evidence of Camille's alleged treachery. Classified files began appearing on public networks, their contents suggesting that she had been selling military secrets to foreign governments for years. Financial records materialized in Helix's databases, showing payments from countries that were considered hostile to American interests. The AI system itself began displaying warnings that its security had been compromised from within. But Camille was ready. Instead of fighting the attack, she allowed it to proceed while her own countermeasures tracked every byte back to its source. Richard's entire network, carefully hidden behind layers of encryption and misdirection, suddenly became visible as his own weapons were turned against him. "It appears we're experiencing a cyber attack," Camille announced calmly as alarms began sounding throughout the convention center. "Fortunately, our AI system is designed to trace such intrusions to their source." On the massive screens flanking the stage, Richard's hidden network began to appear. Financial records showing payments to mercenaries and arms dealers appeared in real time. Communication logs revealed plans to assassinate competitors and government officials. Video evidence of meetings with international terrorists who should have been impossible for a legitimate businessman to contact streamed across multiple displays. Richard's face went white as he realized what was happening. The evidence of his crimes was being broadcast to an audience that included senior Pentagon officials, FBI agents, and intelligence officers from allied nations. He reached for his phone, probably to trigger some kind of emergency protocol, but Nathan was already moving through the audience with swift, silent efficiency. "Agent Phoenix, Federal Bureau of Investigation," Nathan said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years in life-and-death situations. "Richard Cale, you're under arrest for conspiracy, arms trafficking, and multiple counts of murder." The audience erupted in chaos as Richard's associates attempted to flee and federal agents who had been positioned throughout the building moved to intercept them. But Richard himself sat frozen, staring at the evidence of his crimes displayed on screens for everyone to see. "You," he said, looking at Nathan with dawning recognition. "You were supposed to be dead." "Your intelligence was flawed," Nathan replied, securing handcuffs around Richard's wrists. "Just like your operational planning." As Richard was led away, still protesting his innocence to anyone who would listen, Camille found herself standing alone on the stage where her company's future had just been secured. The demonstration had become something far more significant: the public destruction of a criminal network that had operated in shadows for decades. Nathan appeared at her side, no longer the quiet maintenance worker she had married, but clearly the federal agent he had always been. "Is it over?" she asked. "The immediate threat, yes. Richard's network will take months to fully dismantle, but the core leadership is neutralized." They stood together in the gradually emptying auditorium, both aware that their fake marriage had served its purpose and would soon end. The contract they had signed specified 6 months, but their objectives had been achieved in 6 weeks. "What happens now?" Camille asked. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with questions that had nothing to do with operational security or mission parameters. "That depends," he said finally, "on whether you want to make decisions based on logic or on what your heart is telling you." Camille thought about the woman she had been 6 weeks ago, brilliant, driven, utterly alone. She thought about the strategic marriage that had been nothing more than a chess move designed to create chaos in her enemy's plans. She thought about the spy who had agreed to help her for his own purposes, and somewhere along the way had become something more. Then she pulled the marriage contract from her purse and slowly tore it in half. "This time," she said, letting the pieces fall like confetti, "no more pretending." Nathan's smile was the first completely genuine expression she had ever seen from him, and Camille realized that the most logical decision she had ever made was to trust something